Metazoa Snapshot is a comprehensive org management solution to help maintain, manage, clean up, and optimize your Salesforce orgs. Visual workspaces with intuitive tools help to reduce complexity and simplify workflow. Just drag, drop, and connect. Optimize your org and lower the total cost of ownership by identifying which assets are used the least and cleaning up unused fields and metadata. Quickly restore metadata in disaster recovery situations by scheduling automated backups or taking snapshots on demand. Easily manage releases and migrate metadata and data between sandbox and production environments while automatically recording deployment history. Visualize profiles and permission sets with mass edit and user assignment capabilities. Compare differences in metadata between orgs and over time, and set notifications to trigger alerts when changes occur. Detailed reporting makes it easy to compare user profiles and manage permission sets across multiple orgs. Reduce complexity with comprehensive org management from Metazoa Snapshot for Salesforce.
Hello and welcome everyone to yet another session at Virtual Dreaming. It does feel kind of like a dream, a nightmare rather, considering the whole epidemic situation. But anyways, the show must go on. Okay, so today I'm here to talk about flow bulkification, and why I chose this topic is because with the growing popularity of low-code solutions in the ecosystem, especially Flow Builder, so it kind of makes a lot of sense to talk about the fundamental working of these tools so that we can design solutions that are more robust and have a higher fault tolerance. Now, before dwelling into the topic, I want to give a big shout out to all our sponsors for making this event a great success, and also to our charity partners, some great work being done there as well. Alright, so who am I? As you can already see, my name is Narendra Singh. I am currently working as a Salesforce developer in Berlin for a platinum consulting company called Sales5. I also run a blog at forcepanda.wordpress.com, and I'm currently a part of Lightning Einstein Champion program. I have had also the chance to be a part of Lightning and Analytics Champions program prior to this program. Okay, and besides Salesforce, I love playing and watching football, volleyball, and basketball. Feel free to reach out on social media. If you want to have a conversation with me, I'll be more than happy to engage. Okay. All right. So, what do I have in store for you today? I know this is not the kind of agenda slide you were expecting. So, in brief, we will try to understand possibly each and every aspect that is related to flow bulkification. And yeah, that's pretty much we are going to do. Okay. Now to set up some context, as when I decided to do a talk on this topic, I opened up a Salesforce doc, and now in my head, I am imagining this conversation happening between me and the Salesforce doc. Okay, so here's what I said. Hey, I'm going to do a talk on flow bulkification at Virtual Dreaming. And you know what? This is how the doc responded. So the doc said, flows are automatic. Flow interviews are automatically bulkified. So say goodnight and go home. Yeah. So any guesses what happens next? Okay, let's skip that part. Well, I accepted the challenge, obviously. Okay. Now time to see if what the dog says is really true or not. Yeah. So let's first talk about a quick use case that we will see, and basically we will see what happens behind the back. Is it really bulkified, and is it really not? Okay, so here is the use case. So the use case states that when an account is marked as inactive, delete all the opportunity contact role records on the child opportunities of the account. This may be not very legit use case for the real world scenario, but anyways, we are going to use it for this particular demo. All right, so let's jump into the use case. We have our org here. Now, to save us some time, I already built a flow for us and I already have some data in my org. So let's look at that as well. I have this flow with me and let's see. Now I have this account which has 100 child opportunities and each child opportunity has their own opportunity contact role. So if you can open any one of these, let's see. So they have their own contact role, yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at the flow, how it looks and how we have set it up. So the first thing that happens is we have a variable called var account ID that will be passed to the flow. Now, once we have the account ID, we are going to query all the child opportunities for that account. And yeah, that's pretty much we are going to do in this step. Then we are going to loop over all of these opportunities and get all the child records of those opportunities. So var loop ID, so basically get all the opportunity contact roles where opportunity ID is the current opportunity ID of the loop we are iterating on. Yeah, now the next step is simply we are just deleting the collection of opportunity child opportunity contact roles. Now let's see if it really works. Yeah, so we are not going to run actually mark the account as inactive. Rather, what we will do is just pick up the ID of the contact and debug the flow and really see if it works. All right, so let's run this. Something went wrong. Okay. Mm, let's. Okay. What just happened? Too many SOQL queries. The flow says it's bulkified. Okay. So let's break the myth here. A lot of people get confused about, the term automatically is kind of bit confusing to a lot of people. They think that uh, doing an SOQL query just simply like that is bulkified, so you don't really have to care about it, how you are using it. But that's not the case, as we just saw. Yeah. All right. So, so what just happened here? That's what we are going to understand in this whole session. And before we move forward, let's quickly take a look at the basic terminology, that basic terms that we are going to use during the course of this session. So first up is transaction. So what are what simply a transaction means is that it represents a state of operations, is a set of operations that are executed as a single unit. Now, so basically all these operations can include a DML, query to the database, callouts, etc. Yeah. And next up we have float transaction. So float transaction again represents a set of operations that are executed as a single unit, but in the context of a flow. So flows within themselves follow a transactional execution, and flow transaction is a subset of a transaction. So there can be multiple or just a single flow transaction happening inside one bigger transaction. Okay. And then we have flow interview. So flow interview is nothing but a running instance of a flow. To make it a bit more clear, what we define when creating the flows is flow is called flow definition, but when that flow is being launched, that running instance of the flow is termed as flow interview, and all this information is stored in some standard S objects called flow interview view, I guess, or flow, or just flow interview, and then we have flow definition view. Yeah. All right. Now, yes, one more important thing is that a flow transaction can have multiple instances of interviews running in it, or it could be just a single instance of flow. Okay. And lastly, we have bulkifiable elements. If you are wondering why the size of the container is too big, is because it's bulkifiable. I hope you get the joke. All right. Okay, so what exactly is bulkify elements? Uh, any flow element that performs a DML statement or a SOQL query or does something else external to the flow are termed as bulkifiable elements. So these elements are bulkifiable because they can be collectively executed as one, and we will see more on that in the upcoming slides, how that is being handled or what I really mean by that. All right, so let's quickly take a look at what are those bulkifiable elements. So we have get records, create records, update records, delete records, and the action element in which has a lot of actions like post to chatter, send an email. All of these elements are bulkifiable elements. All right. So now that we are done with the terminologies and what are bulkifiable elements, let's pick up a use case which we will be using to understand the flow bulkification process. And the use case states that when a case is created, check if the parent account of that case has more than 5 open cases. If yes, send an email to the account owner as a notification. All right. So it's a pretty decent use case, pretty simple. So what I did was I built a flow solution for this, and I took a snapshot of this flow so that we can reference it in the slides. And here is how the flow solution is going to look. So in the first step, we just query all the open cases for the parent record of the case that is being created. And in the next step, we just check the size of those list of cases. If it's more than 5, we simply send an email to the account owner. Fairly simple. Yeah. Now what we are going to consider here is 2 cases, and for the case 1, what we will see is when a single record is created and the parent record for this case has more than 5 open cases. So what's going to happen is, as you can see on the screen, the case gets created, the flow gets invoked, a flow interview is created for that particular record being created, which is being created. And and the flow interview runs and it executes step 1, step 2, and step 3. Yes, fairly simple. But now let's move on to the case 2, when there are more than 2 cases being created and both of them have more than 5 open cases. So the first step obviously being the cases getting created. Once the cases are in the process of getting created, the flow is invoked, and now what is going to happen is the flow is going to run a flow interview. Basically that's how it works behind the scenes in the flow builder. So each record in the transaction will have their own separate flow interviews running in parallel of each other. They kind of run in parallel. It's difficult to put in words because it's exactly not documented somewhere. Okay, so 2 flow interviews are created, one for each case 1 and case 2, and now they will be running in parallel, as I said. So the next step is, the first step would be is getting the cases, the number of cases. Yeah, and since this is a bulkifiable element, so here's where the flow bulkification process will come into the picture. So what the flow bulkification process, basically what is going to happen is, instead of doing 2 separate queries, it is going to do a combined SOQL query, and then this combined SOQL query, after getting all the results, it's going to pass back all the corresponding results back to the flow interviews of case 1 and case 2. So these 2 queries are not going to be counted as 2 SOQL queries in the whole transaction, but just one query, because the flow builder takes care of it. So we don't really have to think about how it does, because nobody knows exactly how it's being done other than the Salesforce, other than the people who build this platform. Yeah, so moving forward, then we have decision element. Since it's not bulkifiable, it's going to be running in parallel as separate in both the separate interviews. And then the next step is that we are going to send an email to the account owner. Again, this is a bulkifiable element. So what is going to happen is, the we are going to send those emails, but how it's gonna send those emails is as a combined action. So it will only count as one instead of 2 actions being executed, and that is how your flow bulkification process takes place in the background. And that is what I really meant by combining all the bulkifiable elements and collectively executing them as one. So I hope that clarifies a lot of things that we discussed earlier in the slides. All right, so now we know that how the flow bulkification process works, but the question still remains is that, are flows really bulkified? Well, it's a yes no question. So flows are bulkified, but only the interview operations are bulkified collectively only when they execute the same element. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that individual flow interviews are not bulkified. So if you use a query inside a loop, it's not bulkified, and that query will count against your limit. And in a single flow interview, they are not going to be executed as collectively, which we just saw what happens for the multiple flow interviews. All right, so I have something that I would like to show you to have a bit more understanding about the bulkification process. So I'm gonna switch back to my org and let's see what. So here is, I have a small flow, and what I simply did was a bit of change in the earlier use case that we used. So now I have one more output which says what happens when when the number of open cases is less than 5. Yeah, so what I'm simply doing is a query on either of the outcome. So this is just a random query. So what we are trying to demonstrate or see here is how the query limit or how the query count is being affected when we insert the records. Yeah, so this flow is being invoked by a process builder. And at the same time, before by the time it loads, I have two accounts, one which has two open cases, as you can see here, and then I have another account which has 5 open cases. Yes, and we can see how many cases we have. Yeah, so the total count is 5. And then we have this process with us which invokes when a case is created, and it simply calls a flow, and passes the parent record ID, parent account ID to the flow, as well as the case ID which is being created. All right, so here is what I have. Now I'm going to jump to my developer console. Yeah, now I have picked up the IDs of those two accounts, account with 5 open cases and account with 2 open cases. And what I'm simply doing is I'm inserting cases on those accounts, open cases on those accounts. Yeah, so the first case is that we simply insert one case and to the account which has 5 open cases. So what ideally should happen is it should follow this path. It first queries all the accounts, get the size of the list, and then it checks whether it has more than 5 or less than 5. And since we already know it's gonna have more than 5 because the account already has 5 open cases, so it's going to execute this query. Yeah, so what is going to happen is the total number of queries that get executed are 2 in this case. So let's just verify this result. Yeah, so I'm gonna open my developer console and let's see. All right, so what we have is I have the IDs of the two accounts, one with 5 open cases, one with 2 open cases. So now I'm going to insert a list of cases, a collection of cases. In first case, what we are considering is just one case record associated with the account with 5 open cases. Yes, so I'm gonna execute this, and let's see. Oh, all right, so as you can see, the total number of SOQL queries that get executed is 2. All right, so it's pretty understandable. We understood there was just one record being created, and according to the flow we have 2 get records elements, so 2 SOQL queries make sense. Yes, now what happens if we insert two two case records with the parent account as the account which has more than 5 open cases already associated with it? Yeah, so in this case the result should still be the same, because as we learned from in our previous slide, that the same bulkifiable elements in the multiple flow interviews get collectively executed. So what's going to happen is, for case 1 and case 2, this SOQL query will be combined as same as the case with this. So both of these will be combined and executed as just one SOQL query. And let's verify that as well. So now I'm going to execute this, and yes, all right. So still we get the number of SOQL queries as 2, as expected, because we discussed this. But let's make it more interesting. Now I have a third case that I'm going to insert with the other two cases that we already have, and this case is associated with the account which has less than two open cases. So in this case, what's going to happen in our flow? Let's see. So first, uh, the case will be created, and then it will check the number of open case records, then the size of the collection, then we check what is the size of collection. So for the two cases which have more than 5 open cases, it will execute this query, and this query is going to be executed as a collective, as a basically it will be, there will be a collective execution. Why? Because they are executing the same element here. But for the third case, which has less than 5 open cases, for that this element is going to be executed. So overall in this case, what is going to happen is, for the first two cases we will have still two SOQL queries, but for the third case we will have, but just with the addition of third case we will have one additional query, because still what we understand that this is the same element, so still it's going to be executed as one. But this, for the third case, is not same as this element, since it's a different element, so it will again do a SOQL query, and it's going to count against the limit that we have for the SOQL query. So let's verify that as well, just to conclude what is going to be a result in this case. It's that it should have 3 SOQL queries. Yeah, so let's verify that as well. Execute, and let's see. All right, as expected and discussed, we have 3 SOQL queries being happening in the background. So this is how the flow bulkification process works, and this is how you need to understand that only the same elements get bulkified over the collection of all the flow interviews that are being run in the process in one flow transaction. Also, I just like to quickly mention that if we just add additional case which is which has less than 2 open cases, and we are inserting those case records, still the result is going to be the same, because for this case as well, this query element will be executed, so which is already being executed for this. I hope this is not sounding too confusing for you guys. Maybe you can watch this session over to get a better understanding of what I'm saying right now. Even I'm confused. Anyways, so this is how it really works, the whole flow bulkification process. I hope I was able to do some justice to this topic, and yes, let's see if we have anything other. Yeah, okay, so yes, this is an interesting question. So what can I do to bulkify my flows? That's a legit question. So the first and very foremost thing that you need to understand is how the bulkification process works, which we just discussed. Yeah, so the first and primary objective is to avoid using DML operations and SOQL query inside a loop. So how it translates in the flow is that you should avoid using elements like get records, update records, create records with inside a loop. Yeah, and whenever you are doing mass operations, use collection variables to avoid, for example, if you have to create a record, what you can do, instead of creating the record inside a loop every time, you can just add that record to a collection and then update that collection at the end of your flow. Also, sometimes it's a bit difficult to handle all the bulkification, and sometimes it's just almost impossible to have to avoid using a SOQL query inside a loop. So in those cases, what you can do is you can consider using invocable Apex actions for handling those kind of complex business logics. And this is how you can extend your flows using Apex actions as well. So this kind of helps in the bulkification process at times. All right, so that's pretty much it from my side. I have a flow resource that you can refer to. You can simply type flow bulkification Salesforce on the Google, and this should be the help article that you will get in your results. So this is the flow article, help article that you can refer to, and that's it from my side, guys. Let's open the floor for Q&A, if any.